Good morning, everyone. It is the University of Melbourne Graduate Student Association's GradChat program again. It's speaking to an expert, and we have had overwhelming responses from you requesting us to bring panel members on different topics. And today we are very fortunate to have Vanessa Stanton, the financial counselor from the UMSU services, the legal services, and we have Sarah-Ann Tay from as the clinical psychologist from CAPS joining us. So before I commence, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, where I'm broadcasting from. I'd also like to pay my respect to the past, present, and the emerging leaders of our community, and my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. So thank you, Vanessa, for joining us on board. And it has been quite a stressful period for everyone across the globe, but our graduate and our student community have had extremely difficult and a stressful period, because suddenly they find themselves in self-isolation. They find they have had difficulty being employed because most of their casual jobs they don't exist anymore. And we just thought that they have the burden of paying all their bills, keeping their fees up, and the financial stress often leads to mental health issues. So we'd like to welcome you on board, Vanessa, and tell us a little bit about the financial services and actually the importance of accessing your program.
Thanks for inviting me to be part of the panel today. I'm wondering if we could have the first slide up, if possible.
Yes, definitely.
Because the first slide will indicate the sort of services that I can provide, the sort of issues that I can assist students with, whether they're undergrad, postgrad. If we can go back one back
slide, yeah, perfect.
So it doesn't matter whether you're a domestic student or international student, as I said, undergrad or postgrad, you're welcome to use the financial counselling service, which, as you said, is part of the legal service, which is part of the advocacy and legal service on level 4 of the UMSU building. So, as you said, a bad financial situation can cause all sorts of stresses and sometimes mental health issues, because it's just so difficult to deal with. If you don't have money, you're extremely vulnerable, or if you don't have enough money to pay what you need to pay. Mm-hmm. So those are the sorts of things listed: rent, utility bills, phone and internet, credit cards, credit reports. I'll explain a bit more about that coming up. Car loans and personal loans, and motor accident debts. So we have quite a few of those at the legal service.
And it would be right to say that for students, there's also the stress of, particularly international students getting their fees, paying for their fees being an additional burden for them?
That's certainly an issue for a lot of international students.
Yeah, so we move on to the next slide, yeah?
Yeah, they obviously do pay more than the domestic students to attend uni.
Fantastic, okay.
Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. Now, it's difficult. People think, oh, but I haven't got any money, or I haven't got much money. How can I do budgeting? But it's still helpful just to see how much more money you need to be able to pay your commitments. Mm-hmm. So it's very simple. There's a link at the bottom of the slide, which is a fantastic budget planner. You can save it and you can keep adapting it as your situation changes. But it's amazing how many people come to see me and they've never done a budget. Okay. So it is really important to know how much you're spending and if you're in debt every fortnight or if you're actually ahead.
So would you say, Vanessa, whether it is, people have lots of money or small money, like for anyone to have a small budget, to do a budget would be very wise, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it may be a budget that you're not happy with when you've done it, but at least that then you can come and talk to me and we can talk about how you can vary it, how you can make it a better budget for you, even if you don't have a lot of money, little things you can do.
Fantastic.
So we've moved on now to credit cards. So this is a list if you have a credit card or you're going to apply for one. It's really important to get the best deal. Otherwise, you can leave yourself in all sorts of stress because you can't meet the monthly payments and you have fees put on. Those fees have interest put on them as well. So this is a list of the sort of things that you should be looking at if you're going to get it, and the sort of things you want to avoid, such as paying a huge annual fee, having how much the late fees and over limit fees are they larger than normal credit cards? And there's also a link down the bottom which has a lot of tips about what to look for in getting a loan, a personal loan or a credit card. So, but this is just in a nutshell, some handy tips there.
So Vanessa, one of the things I think often we experience at GSA, where people have called and said, you know, I took a credit card because I really needed to pay my fees, and I was told I would have these many days interest-free, 55 or 90 or sometimes 6 months interest-free, and I bought furniture on that. Can you tell me what are some of the the traps that we actually fall into and how we can avoid that?
Yeah, well, it's usually at maximum 55 days. If we can just go back to the previous slide, the credit card slide, possibly. Thank you. So it's usually a maximum of 55 days for a normal credit card interest-free period. But I think you're also referring to the transfer balance offers that are coming up constantly from different creditors and credit providers. So they can be a trap because the idea is that you have to pay the balance off within the 6 months interest-free, or it just goes onto the credit card, the second credit card that you've got. Yeah. Transfer the money onto and accrues interest all over again. So you should really only do the balance transfers if you know you can pay off the full balance of the original credit card within the interest-free period. And that's hard. That's really hard.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good message that, readily available interest cards, credit cards are not really the solution sometimes to dealing with your debt. And, being very thoughtful and getting proper advice before you do that. Would you say that from a financial counselor, that would be a message you want to let everyone know?
Yeah, I mean, as a financial counsellor, I can't tell you to get this credit card or that credit card because that's not part of my work. But I can tell you the things to look for and the things to avoid generally. And that's enough information for people to know what to avoid and what to go for. But credit cards, of course, are best as a last resort. Yeah. If you can't pay something, then okay, that's great. You've got a credit card to back you up in an emergency or whatever. Or you can use a credit card and pay it off every month and not pay the interest. Yeah. Yeah. The problem is that people get out of control with them. A lot of people, it's not unusual.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. So we could move to the next slide.
Yeah, Afterpay is something probably most people have heard of now because it's been promoted a lot. There are other services like Afterpay too, but Afterpay is the leader, where you get your goods and then you pay for them afterwards. So that's fine. It's an okay system as long as you don't miss any payments, because then you get late payment fees. So it's otherwise interest-free, but you just have to be careful to make the payments on time. So that's about all I'd say on Afterpay.
Can you just explain to us, Vanessa, like, when people are giving you credit cards, do they have any responsibility to actually, identify or have some social responsibility to see whether you actually can pay the debt or not? Like, so, if I'm a person and what is their responsibility?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about there. Responsible lending is the legal term. Yeah. And yeah, creditors are supposed to know that you'll be able to repay your credit card within a certain time without causing yourself hardship. Well, that's fine when you apply for the card, of course, that can be completely correct, that it's responsible lending and you could repay it, but life changes. We all know that. Things happen. that means that you can't repay them suddenly. So yeah, that's something else to take into account.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
So we could move. Yeah, perfect.
So debts, yeah, a lot of people struggle with debts. I mean, that's why most people come to me. It's not planning ahead. It's, oh my God, I'm in trouble. How can I get out of it? What can I do? So one of the things with credit is just make sure you really need it. And why are you borrowing it? Why are you getting a personal loan or a credit card? Do you really need to? Can you afford the repayments? Are you dealing with someone who's actually a licensed credit provider, not some shark in a dark corner in an alleyway? And do you know what you're saying, what you're signing? You definitely need to read the contract, no matter how boring it is. Just make sure you know what it is that you're committing to.
Yeah, it's just not saying all you need to do is place 3 signatures and then they put a cross mark, just blindly sign, isn't it? That's something.
That's right. Yeah, don't just sign where the crosses are. Give it a read, because it's really, really important. If you get into strife and you say, oh, I didn't know that, I didn't read the contract, that's no defense for you, unfortunately.
Yeah, fantastic. Sarah, I may just bring you in from CAPS to just ask you that, people, I can see how the financial services and the CAPS services could be quite, how the impact would be there for both of you all. Like, do you get a lot of students coming to CAPS with, really quite devastated because of the debt, the overburden of the debt?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Rashna. Thank you. And I think what I wanted to say about that is that, we're kind of all in living through the same pandemic, but that the pandemic can have quite unique and different challenges for the person. And of course, definitely one of those challenges can be financial stress. And something that we see is, for example, students who may have lost their jobs, for example, if you're working casually and you've suddenly kind of lost your job, and Vanessa was saying before that sometimes things might can change quite drastically, that you might suddenly find yourself, in debt. So, that's definitely one of the factors I think that we're seeing, in CAPS at the moment that can be a factor in causing stress or distress during this time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Over to you, Vanessa.
Thanks. Can we have the next slide, please? So there are several ways to try to get out of the debt that you're concerned about.
Yeah.
One of the most practical is requesting a hardship variation. So I don't know if people are familiar with hardship, but just in a nutshell, if you're in debt or you think you're going to miss payments, get in touch with the creditor straight away and ask for hardship. So a hardship could be just 3 months. It's usually 3 months, but it can be longer, where you don't have to make payments, and hopefully also the interest is frozen during that period. It just gives you a bit of breathing space. Some creditors call it a payment holiday as well. So that's how to think of it. And while we're in the COVID-19 situation, credit card providers are supposed to give 6 months hardship. So something to keep in mind as well. That's the government's initiative.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you're saying is that, procrastinating over that debt and worrying yourself, I think to be a bit proactive would be good. And one of the way is to ring your creditors and talk about your situation and ask for that hardship variation. And during this pandemic period, there are certain provisions that are there that support you. But have you also any advice during that period that you're waiting? Like, suppose, let's say I have a debt of about 4,000 and I've been given 3 months or 6 months. I think, 6 months flies quite ahead quickly. And what can the person who's got a debt during that period do? I think you had some good tips here, like sell an asset. And what does that actually mean?
Well, if you have something that you can sell, and often we have stuff in our places that we don't use and we haven't thought about selling it, but if you can get on Facebook or Gumtree, whatever, and sell some things, that's a way of getting cash instantly. So that's something people just don't think about as often as they might. So that can be helpful. And, just in that hardship period, do your best to take a restock of your financial situation. It does give you a huge relief from the stress to have hardship, but you can't just have a holiday on it, you've got to be proactive and think of how you're going to resume payments and get things back on track as well. And seeing a financial counsellor can be part of that. You're not alone. There's always someone you can see and talk things through with.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about consumer rights? What does that actually mean in simple terms?
Well, there's what's called the consumer law that applies to all the states, less so in Western Australia, but that's not our problem. So, yeah, there are certain rights that you have as a consumer, for instance, asking for hardship. And you just need to know what they are. And, you know, certainly not getting involved with loan sharks, that sort of thing. Those are your consumer rights, not to be ripped off. That's your biggest consumer right, is not being ripped off. And there are laws around that. Okay.
And would it be something that when they want to talk about their issues with rights, is there a particular, would they just come to UMSU Legal, or
yeah, sure.
They could?
There's also Consumer Action Law Centre in Melbourne.
Yeah.
They're based in Melbourne, but they have a national helpline for debts and so on, and they also know what your consumer rights are, and they can support you as well if you can't come to UMSU.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are plenty of places around that can assist you to learn your consumer rights.
Yeah.
And of course there are websites and the like as well. Consumer Action Law Centre has a very good website with a lot of information about your consumer rights.
Fantastic. So what I'm getting out of this from you, Vanessa, is that, you know, trying to actually, I mean, it's very burdensome in the mind and it's extremely stressful, but to seek out help and be proactive about your debt rather, and it's not going to go away if you don't take any help. That kind of messaging, isn't it?
Exactly. It's only going to get worse if you don't do something. People feel very alone, but you're not alone because there are professionals around who can assist you.
Yeah. And would you also say that, you know, sometimes I think there's a shame attached to it, you know, I guess, oh, you know, I haven't managed my finance properly, and feeling a bit confronted about your inability to have managed your finance. I think there's a message, clear message that, you know, that's why services like yours are available, and we all fall into that trap sometime in our life. And, you know, seeking help from UMSU and the financial counseling that's what the services are there for. So that's a fantastic message to get out there. So,
yeah, a lot of people are embarrassed when they come, but there's absolutely no need to be. Speaking personally, years ago, I was in financial difficulties myself, and I managed to work my way out of them with a financial counsellor's help, and that's how I became a financial counsellor. So I understand completely about the stress and the embarrassment and the difficulties, and certainly there's no judgment coming from me. I empathise.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. That's so reassuring. And we may move on to the next slide.
So I'm just going to briefly mention, because people can Google it, but in the essence of time, that there's such a thing as a credit score and credit reports. Your credit score comes out of what's in the credit report. You can Google that and get more information. And on the next slide, but not yet, please. I have some providers of credit scores. Basically, what's in your credit report and what is your credit score means how much money people are prepared to lend you, and in fact, if they're prepared to lend you money at all. Just one note I want to say on the COVID-19 situation there. If you ask for hardship on your credit card or anything else that you pay regularly during this COVID-19 situation, so for the next 6 months, it will not be listed against you on your credit report. And that's, again, something that's come out of the government. So that's definite. It will not go on your credit report if you have to ask for hardship during this COVID-19 situation.
Okay, that's a really good message. And I think, you know, if people later on down the period notice that those, you know, you've had a credit report done and you feel that, you know, the findings are there, which was during the COVID-19 period, you should be able to appeal for, you know, about it. So
you can get it removed, but I mean, it simply shouldn't be on there in the first place. If you get a copy of your credit report and it definitely will have to be removed. So yeah, it's not an issue.
Sorry, I had a question for Vanessa actually from a student that sent to me. Credit scores and credit reports, are they government managed?
No, they're not. They're private companies, and there are several of them, and they just make money from people, creditors, credit providers who subscribe to their system. So if a credit provider subscribes to a particular credit rating person, then they get access to everybody's information and whether they're credit worthy or not.
And do they vary between providers, and are they licensed to do this?
Yes, they do have to be licensed in a sense. I'm not sure how onerous it is, but what was the first part of the question, sorry?
Do they vary between providers? I think that's one of the questions.
Yeah, they do. They do, for instance, but they must all give free copies of the credit report. So that's something that's regulated, for instance.
Okay.
If you want it quickly, then you can pay and get it quickly. But if you're prepared to wait a certain amount of time, a week, 3 weeks, then you can get a copy for free. So that's important to remember.
Okay.
And just a question, Vanessa, why is the credit report important? Like, how does it impact us?
Well, if you have a poor credit report, a poor credit score in that report, it can affect your future ability to borrow.
Okay, yeah.
Now, they only last for 5 years, the listings, and then they drop off at the 5-year point that they've been on for 5 years. They just drop off the credit report. But nonetheless, in that period of time, it affects your ability to get credit. And that might be for something important like a house. So, yeah.
Yeah, particularly. Yeah, just thinking about the future impact is very important, isn't it?
If you can, yes. I mean, a lot of people are caught up in the present, especially at this moment that's so stressful for everyone with the COVID situation. But if you're able to think of the future as well, that's great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Move on to the next slide.
So this is just a little information where you can get a free copy of your credit report if you're willing to wait 10 days. I mean, you can do that anyway. If you wait 10 days, you can get a free copy. But these are the online providers, some of them.
Yeah, and we'll definitely put up these resources on our website too.
Sure.
So moving on to the next one.
So this is really important. These are the ombudsman schemes. They're national except for Energy and Water Ombudsman, which is Victorian. So if you have a complaint about any of these services, you can go to the Ombudsman and it's a free service. They will investigate. You just need to check on the website that the company you want to complain about is part of the Ombudsman scheme, because not every company is, though most are.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a great thing to do. And for instance, if I have a water bill and I'm not happy with it and I complain to the Ombudsman, I cannot be disconnected from that service, even if I'm in arrears, until the complaint is resolved by the Ombudsman.
Vanessa, I may just, for people who are quite new to our country or people who are not familiar with this word, what is the role of an ombudsman and what does that mean actually?
Yeah, so they're an independent person who makes decisions or enables decisions to be made through a sort of mediation. So they will decide if you have a complaint, whether you have any virtues in your complaint or not. And they will try to negotiate on your behalf with the credit provider.
Oh, thank you. And you're not going to be adversely impacted because you make the complaint?
No, definitely not. And as I said, it's a free service. It's a very valuable service. It can just start off as a complaint that gets resolved, or it can escalate up, and then the Ombudsman will make a decision themselves on it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Vanessa.
And just while we're talking about schemes, I wanted to mention the Utility Relief Grant Scheme run by the Victorian Department, DHHS. So you can get up to $650 every 2 years for each utility. So electricity, gas, water, you can get $650 on each of those utilities every 2 years. If you have a healthcare card, and if, for instance, you meet the criteria such as you've recently lost your job or your income's lower, that's the most common one, but there are others as well. So well worth checking out there if you're having problems paying your utility relief grant. And you don't have to use $650 all at once. If your bill is only $200, then you've still got $450 left for the remainder of the 2 years.
That is such valuable information for people who are having hardships, that, you know, there are small little ways that you can actually look at how you can lower your expenses or manage, you know, your money. And so even if it's a group household and the bill is coming in a person's name, it's one person would be able to negotiate on behalf of the household, isn't it?
Well, if you have that in writing to do
Yeah.
that, or the person whose name the bill is in can negotiate themselves on everyone's behalf too. So
Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic news. Can I just ask you, in relation to superannuation, is, you know, students are often, just recently with international students, being given a message that, you know, try to use your superannuation to manage your day-to-day life if you don't have a job. What are your thoughts on that, Vanessa?
yeah, it's been a huge issue during the COVID situation, actually, because the government's been suggesting that people can get their super or most of their super out under hardship during this situation because they lost their work, or their work's decreased. Look, it's a good thing to have it there in case you need it.
Yeah.
But the problem is the long term. If you take most of your super out now, what will you live on later?
Yeah.
When you need to retire, or if you become so ill that you can't work. So it's an issue, but I mean, I think about 1 million people have taken hardship on their super in the last month or so. And I just want to mention there too, there are scams around that. I'm going to talk about scams a bit very soon, but I just want to mention, since you've raised super, that there are a lot of super scams at the moment with people accessing other people's super illegally and ripping them off. So yeah, just beware that everything's above board.
Yeah, thank you. Move on to the next slide.
So I'm just going to talk very briefly about scams because it's such a huge issue at the legal service, and it's something that you can usually avoid if you have the information. So generally, these are the sorts of scams: ATO, Centrelink, government refund, a lotto win, computer problem, shopping voucher win, and romance in a nutshell. So if we can go to the next slide, please.
We move on to the next slide.
So this is a scam. This is one I got. A lot of these ones are personal. Happily, I didn't fall for any of them, but you know, I could have if I wasn't educated in it. So just an email saying, you know, can you help by letting me deposit all this money in your bank account? So obviously money laundering happening there. So next one, please. So this guy, the email, who sent the email, he actually even had set up the LinkedIn and social media profiles and so on to try to look legit. I checked it out. Next slide, thanks.
The next one.
This is one, yeah, it's supposed to look like a My Voucher, but just something to be suspicious of. There's a time limit. If it was really a competition, fill in a survey and get a My Voucher, wouldn't have a time limit like that to put pressure on you so you don't have time to think. 3 vouchers left, quick, get in. There's only 3 left.
Yeah.
And a lot of information that they're asking for. I mean, if you're filling in a survey and you're just going to win a voucher, why do they need all that information? Your name, sure. You know, and they tried to make it look real, but you can tell it's really dodgy looking site. And the English is not very good, which is another thing to look for. Great, next slide, thanks. So this is one that came up on my computer, and other people have had it too. You get a loud beep and it says, oh, you've got damage on your network. There's a virus and spyware. Stuff is being stolen. This is what's being stolen right now. It's very terrifying. And I actually know a financial counsellor who fell for it, sadly. So it also says, you know, ring our engineers straight away or contact our engineers straight away so they can walk you through fixing it. And of course you pay hundreds of dollars and it's not even real.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone. I remember as a young person having this, a voucher sent to me that you've won $10,000 or something like that. And I think of a financial counselor. I remember I was working at that time somewhere in Coburg, and I met Peter Gartland, who was a financial counselor at that time.
Yes.
And I don't know, it was just a wisdom that I had to just say, oh, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of financial hardship because I've got this little voucher which says that I'm going to have $10,000 is $100. And I think that was a good learning about what a financial counselor can actually do for you in your life, give you that additional wisdom.
Exactly, yeah, just be careful, and if you're not sure, ask someone. Next slide, please. Now, this is the biggest doozy of all, romance scams. And when I do anti-scam training for students, this is the one I love most. All I'm going to say at this point is that this man on screen, this US Army soldier, he was romancing thousands of women online and getting heaps and heaps of money from them without knowing anything about it because his identity was stolen.
Oh, gee.
So there's actually a support club for all the thousands of women who were ripped off unwittingly by him. Yeah, so just be careful. And, you know, romance scams really play on people's emotions. So just be careful if someone's romancing you on the net. I mean, I hope it's for real for your sake, but be careful.
That's right.
Thank you. Next slide. And that's how you can check if something seems a bit sus, even a tiny weeny bit sus, check it out with ScamWatch.
Yeah.
Thanks. Another slide? That's it? Okay, because I moved the last one to first, yeah.
Okay, so Vanessa, I guess that, you know, this has been very, very helpful. So what I can summarize from what I've learned, understood from your session is that, you know, we are going through a very difficult period of time. We are, you know, some of our community members have lost their jobs. There has been health issues. You know, people have been compounded with mental health issues. So managing your finances can be quite stressful. And I think the first tip was about using tools that are there for budgeting, you know, trying to consolidate your debts and trying to getting some financial counseling support, and being aware of, you know, you're not kind of borrowing from this credit card to pay the other credit card and look at short-term wins, but really thinking about, you know, what are some long-term impacts in relation to your credit reports, being careful of people who are using your vulnerability. And I think what is the best way for people to contact you if they are in dire stress, and, you know, what can UMSU League Financial Counselling offer, or are there other places that they can access?
Yes, certainly. I work Thursdays and Fridays, which is not a lot to service the whole university, though I'm obviously happy to talk to people. But if you have something come up on another day or you're very worried, there's the National Debt Helpline. I think it's still 1800 007 007. So they have phone financial counsellors who can give you information, and they also have lawyers if it's necessary to refer on. Yeah, so I'm happy to talk to people. At the moment, of course, I'm working from home like most of us. So I don't have any phone access, but I do have email, and I'm happy for my email address to be distributed if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. Vanessa, thank you so much for your time. And we understand you had only 2 days, and it was so kind of you to accommodate this request in such a short period of time. I definitely would say that GSA has been very, very lucky to have UMSU Legal working very closely with our graduate community, supporting them through various legal issues. And just for the graduates who are listening, or your students who are listening to the program, to understand, you know, the service is quite inundated with many requests. So being patient, sending an email, and not expecting the phone to be responded straight away is an issue for all our services. So all these details and the slides will be put up on our website. And I'll request Tavita to introduce our next guest, Sarah, who I think whose information will be very valuable and handy when you're talking about financial counseling or the stress because financial counseling always, the impact is you are quite mentally upset. You know, your behavior may change a lot because you're under so much of financial stress, or you know, impacting on your behavioral issues, your capacity to continue with your normal life. So welcome on board, Sarah and Tavita, and thank you very much, Vanessa.
Yeah, thanks, Rashna, for the intro, and yeah, again, thank you, Vanessa, for the sort of comprehensive look at what we can do and be aware of when dealing with our debt. So full appreciation, Vanessa. Thanks so much.